I need to find some woods to frolic in. Stat. I've been working on this video for over 6 months. It's not big or complicated. I just stopped working on it because life gets hard and bad sometimes. But we are here now, and it is almost Halloween, which is perfect timing because today we are making capes. I am a lover of capes. You may know this if you've been around my channel before. My first cape is this green beauty. I made her before a Halloween event that I had to go to. I need to not call it a her. I made this cape before a Halloween event that I was going to with nothing to wear, so a cape it was. I knew I wanted it to be green, so I went to the store and the only fabric I could find in the color I was looking for was stretch suiting fabric, which is not ideal for a cape. But the polyester and elastane or whatever it is made out of ended up being great because there was misty rain all night and it kept me completely dry. Around this time last year, I made my second cape. It was during my 8-week sewing challenge, which you can watch, I'll link it in the description. The cape was originally going to be shorter, like kind of hip length, but I had enough fabric to make it full length and I love the whimsy of a full-length cape, so ended up with this cottage witch vibe cape. I actually love this thing. I wear it all the time, especially in the winter to check the garden on those cold, frosty mornings. But that brings us to now. Today we're making 2 capes. I want them to be a shorter length because I've got my 2 long capes and I don't have any short capes. And for some reason I feel like a shorter cape is more acceptable to wear out in public, and so I'm hoping that out of this I get kind of a jacket that I can wear to the grocery store without being stared at like I'm crazy. I also really want to use up some of my scrap fabric or remnants from previous projects because I've never thrown any fabric away and it's starting to stack up. I do not have any room to store fabric anymore. For the first cape, I want to use that same green fabric that I used for my long cape. As much as it's not the ideal fabric for this kind of project, I do love the color and I have a decent amount of it left. And nothing really to do with it, because I try to only buy natural fiber fabrics now and frankly find polyester really uncomfortable, and so a more costumey piece is probably the best use for this. I just want to make a quick note because I've seen some discourse. I don't buy natural fiber because I think that like polyester is like poisoning us through our skin or whatever. I've seen some like really like tradwife takes about the whole thing. I just get it because it's like more sustainable overall and I have like a load of sensory issues with fabric and it feels better. Okay, let's move on. I am going to use this pattern, which is the same one I used for my long capes. I'm just going to alter it to be shorter. It comes with a few different hood styles, but I think I'm just going to use the same one that I used on my other capes because I like the way it sits. I like the drape of it. I did toy with the idea of doing a standing collar, but I like wearing these capes outside and hoods just come in handy. I'm going to add a capelet. The pattern has 2 layers of capelet. I'm only going to do the shorter one because the overall cape is going to be shorter. I thought it would just sit at a good level. And this cape is going to be decorated. I plan on using trim and embroidery to make it a little more costumey than most of the things I sew, but we will talk about the specifics of that later. For the second cape, I want to use this orange flannel that I have left over from previous projects. I used it during my 8-week sewing challenge, again, linked below, to make a skirt, which I love. I measured it and should have just enough to make this cape. It's so satisfying to be left with barely any scraps after a project. I'm using the exact same pattern, shortened, this time with no capelet, but the same hood. For this cape, however, I'm going to do a type of closure that I've never done before. I tried to Google it to work out what exactly it's called. The closest I could get was calling it a double-breasted closure. In my head, I keep calling it a placket, but I don't think that's correct. Basically, there will be a button on each side of the cape with a piece of fabric kind of to close it. In the style of, I think a lot of old nurse cloaks or capes used to have. I don't know, it's still a thing seen on modern capes, like as jackets. I don't know how to describe what I'm talking about, but you will see it soon enough. I'm going to line this cape, which should give it a bit more structure. I've never lined a cape, so I'm hoping it works out well and doesn't hold it at a weird angle. I'm hoping that gives it a little more warmth and makes it feel like something I can actually wear out of the house. But with the plans made, let's get started on that green cape. Because I've used this exact pattern before, I found it really easy to just get it done. I French seamed it together, and soon it was looking like a garment. I quickly realized that I made a mistake while trying to shorten the pattern. While I thought I was following the original curve of the hem, I miscalculated somewhere and ended up with a very pointy silhouette. At first, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it, and quickly decided that I actually loved it for this more costumey piece. My seams weren't the most even, and there are definitely some messy seams in there, but from the outside, it's looking good. But with the first cape made, it was time to move on to the second. I decided to copy the pattern onto paper this time, so that I didn't have to deal with the full length of the original pattern pieces. I also thought it would help me get more of a curved edge, but you will quickly see that that failed. I cut the main fabric out and then the lining. I clipped them together while they were laying flat so that nothing would shift while I moved them to the machine. I sewed each piece right sides together with the lining and then turned them out so all the raw seams were tucked away. And then I put the cape together. And as always seems to happen when I sew, I put the project down and weeks passed. I came back to it with really very little to do. I cut out the hood, which ended up having to have an extra seam through the middle because I was using these scraps. And I sewed it all together. And then I had a mostly finished cape. All that was left was the closure. I roughly sketched out what I wanted to do and then just decided to run with it. In retrospect, I think my measurements were off a little bit. The cape sits a little bit open, but it's easy to kind of tuck where it needs to be. I did my buttonholes by hand because after all this time I still don't know how to do them by machine. But with that closure done, the orange cape is finished. Back to the green cape, I now had to decide how I wanted to decorate it. Originally, I wanted to go for a Robin Hood inspired design, with forest imagery like leaves and feathers and foxes. But I was watching Merlin and decided that I actually wanted to take inspiration from medieval imagery, loosely. I first chose my colours. I knew I wanted to use this burgundy wine-ish colour, because I love the way it looks with the deep green. I also wanted to use some gold because the entire thing was really quite dark, and I thought that something that caught the light would brighten it up a bit. I did a very rough sketch on my phone and sent it to my best friend for their thoughts, before making a much neater and detailed plan. The swirling design is something you see a lot in illuminated manuscripts along borders, and is almost a simplified version of the floral motifs found in medieval art. It also reminded me of the ceiling of the Hypogeum, which is a subterranean Neolithic necropolis in Malta. That was a very hard line to say. The gold arrow shapes are almost a nod to that original Robin Hood idea, but also just a design that I really liked. I also picked up some twisted gold trim for the hem. I drew up the design on Photoshop and printed out a template to copy to the fabric, which I did in the messiest way possible. My chalk is quite powdery and rubs off very easily, which became a problem. But I got the design transferred and it was time to begin. I hadn't actually done any embroidery for quite a while, and so I knew it was going to be a very slow process. And it was. I used a split stitch, I think, maybe. I don't actually know. It's what I thought was a split stitch, but when I looked up what a split stitch is, it's like I was doing it backwards. At first, I was really motivated and got a good amount done, but that very quickly faded and I put it down for a few weeks, again. I did keep coming back to it though and slowly made progress. I went away for a weekend and had such high ambitions. I truly thought I would finish the whole cape. In reality, I did maybe 3 inches worth of stitches. But eventually I finished the spiral embroidery. Moving on to the gold arrows, I realized very quickly that gold embroidery thread is not the same as regular embroidery thread. I had never worked with it before, and it is so much more textured than anything I had previously embroidered with, and it kept coming undone and stretching in really inconvenient ways. At one point I considered scrapping the whole idea of adding the arrows, but worked through it. It really helped to measure out where each stitch had to go, rather than eyeballing it like I had originally planned. I went back and forth on closure options for this cape. Originally I bought a cape clasp, but it didn't work with the capelet, which covered it, and it felt like a waste of such a nice little piece. And so instead I stuck to a regular hook and bar. And with that, it was done. But now it is time for the reveal. Well, there we have it. 2 capes for Halloween. I really love this one. I didn't film doing the button or chain because it was very last minute, or the hook. This embroidery took me forever, and I didn't add the cord to the bottom because it just didn't look right. I did try it. It wasn't quite what I wanted, but I love this thing. I need to give it a wash because it's still quite chalky, but this is so cute. I think the chain adds a lot. I love how the gold embroidery turned out. I was gonna leave it just as a zigzag, but I'm so glad I didn't. I am so excited. Happy Halloween. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye. I think I'm going grocery shopping in the Cape. It's Halloween. It's like the one day I could possibly do this.